Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DDT Method podcast. This week, I'm incredibly lucky and privileged to sit down with Dusty Hanshaw to talk all things, not just bodybuilding, but basically how the bodybuilding industry and how training in general can evolve over the years, and how you can do different things or keep some things the same to maintain your progress, maintain your health, continue to live the lifestyle that you want to live, and continue to take advantage of all the new and emerging sciences that are coming out. And really just how to stay the course and live the life that you want to live, being jacked, being healthy, having fun, and doing it your way. Now, Dusty's been around the industry for a while now. He's somebody that I've followed basically the entire time that I've been involved in the industry. So if you're coming from the bodybuilding side, you know exactly who he is. And if you're coming from the biohacking and longevity side of things, pay attention because you're going to get some very unique insights from somebody that's done it all and seen it all. And basically been there throughout all of this evolution and all these different things and trends and fads we've seen through the industry. And he's maintained consistency, apparently I can't talk today, the entire time through. Before we get into all that, Dusty, if you can give us a little bit of background, yourself, your competitive history, what got you into all this, and what you've been doing.
So, I mean, basically, bodybuilding started for me the same way it does, I'd say 90% of people that get into it. You play different sports, you get an injury, and you were training with weights during the other sport. For me, the sport was hockey. And when the hockey career ended, I just looked and said, where am I going to put this competitive energy? I had no plan B. I was now going to have to get a job. I had no idea what I was going to do. Got a gym membership. Shortly thereafter in the gym membership, I saw a sign on the wall for a show and I said, I'm going to do that. Put together a quick do-it-yourself prep for, I think it was 6-7 weeks. Hated every step of the way. Said I would never do it again, but I was too stubborn to quit. And somewhere along the way, I realized that what I enjoyed about bodybuilding was actually the part that everyone hates, which is the suffering, the time alone with your thoughts when you are choosing. I hate the word suffering because it's not something someone's taking away from you, but you're choosing to go without things that you could readily have. So kind of got hooked on that, and then probably tinkered like most guys do for 2 or 3 years. And then around 2007, I decided I wanted to make a career out of it. The internet had started to kind of click in, social medias, YouTube, all that. And I saw there was a way for someone like me with less than stellar genetics to find a niche, make some money, and never get a real job. So ran with it from there. My goal when I started bodybuilding was to get a pro card. I was very, very clear that I was not going to have a winning pro career, be winning any Olympias or anything like that. It was just utilizing the internet to share my story with people who I think were a lot like me. I think it's a lot easier, in my opinion, to identify with someone like me with good genetics. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's people that will go look at my photos like, oh, this guy's claiming bad genetics. But I'm talking about compared to the very best. Compared to the best, my genetics are garbage. Compared to average people on the street, my genetics are phenomenal. But I think more people can look because you're like, you don't need a trained eye to look at my physique at my best and go, ooh, that's good. That sucks. That's good. I could see why pro card was as far as he could go. But I think that allowed me to kind of share what I do, how I approach training, eating, all of the above, and had a lot of people following along and kind of rooting for somebody who barely belonged up there.
Now, let's touch on the genetic side of things a little bit more because that's something that's going to make a lot of sense to the seasoned bodybuilding competitors, coaches, and fans that are watching this. But maybe the more intro level people, the guys just getting into bodybuilding and the girls, and maybe the people on the biohacking longevity side, might not see it exactly the same. What were some of your genetic shortcomings in your opinion? And what did you do to push through those to be able to get the pro card?
Well, I mean, the shortcomings were just structurally. I'm really born to be a power lifter or something like that. I have thick joints, which is not what you want in bodybuilding. A wider hip structure, again, great if I wanted to be a power lifter, not great if you want to be a bodybuilder. And just you look at those things, and I tell people all the time, if you want to be a great bodybuilder, the first step is pick the right parents. I didn't pick the right parents for bodybuilding, but I wanted to do it anyways. So what I did was, I think what anybody should do in life, you play the hand you were dealt like it's the one you wanted. So I just looked at what I had and I said, okay, it's not pretty, But I mean, I graduated high school at 215 pounds. So I was like, okay, I can put on muscle. So maybe I'll just put on as much muscle as possible. And although it's going to be a mess, there will be a lot of it. And I knew eventually if I was big enough in the right lineup, and that was very key. I had to the stars had to align for me to have to find a way to win. But that was how I did it. Just got really, really big to the point where in the right lineup, my size and conditioning was enough to overcome the others. Whereas along the way, there were many times I brought a very similar look, but you come up against somebody who's genetically better who also has those things, and it's just not enough. I think, the one piece of advice that I push to a lot of athletes and competitors is it's okay to lose in bodybuilding. It's not okay to be beaten. And the difference is, to me, if you've been beaten, it means you left something on the table. You could have done your cardio better. You could have done your diet better. You could have done your supplementation better, whatever it is. So you could have come in better. But if you do everything in your power to come in at your best, and someone comes along that's better than you, well, there's no defense in bodybuilding. I remind guys that, like in basketball, I could try to stop you from scoring. In bodybuilding, we just show up and whoever's better is better. You know what I mean? So that was the main thing is I just understood what I had. And rather than focus on what I didn't have, I just went in on what I could control.
Now, maybe looking at it through the lens of somebody that's in a similar position to how you were coming up, and maybe it's not the exact same genetic weak points, but there's some things there where it's let's just call it something where, just like in your case, likely no Mr. Olympias in the future, but if they push hard enough, land in the right lineup, that pro card can be a realistic thing, and maybe they could even do a little something with it afterwards.
Mhm.
In your opinion, should that influence how hard somebody pushes outside of just the general effort? I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to leave no stone unturned. And I'm leaning more into not with your personal experience, but how does somebody determine how hard they're going to push some of the other things in bodybuilding, drug selection, stimulant selection? Is there a certain point where you have to go, I'm not going to do all of this because it'll only take me so far? Or is there a situation or a case where somebody could determine I'm going to do everything that's at my fingertips to get
Mhm.
to the level that I think I could get at? How do we determine what's too much for our own limitations or lack thereof?
I mean, in my opinion, throw away your limitations. Um, I think that you should have an understanding of what life is. And, like you, someone who's been sick and got real close to dying, not from bodybuilding, but it really helps you understand what matters. And I think that it's really easy to run through your life. And I'm talking about all sorts of things you do, but let's just stick in bodybuilding and just say, I don't care. I want to be huge. It's easy to say you don't mind shortening your life while you're still living it. But I think if all of a sudden at 40 years old, your kidneys were going out and you're going on dialysis because of bodybuilding choices, I think you would look back and say, yeah, that wasn't worth it. You know what I mean? And I don't care if you won the Olympia before then. I just think that that's a scenario people should really look into. The beauty is you don't have to choose to be a successful bodybuilder or be healthy. And you know that. I mean, the thing that drives me crazy, and I just like you, I coach, and I'll ask somebody, okay, they start with me, and I look at their history, and I'm like, okay, let's clean you out of everything. Also, I need a blood panel right now, and they're like, oh no, I feel good. I'm like, okay, that's great, but you might be great, you might be unhealthy. The answers, just like in high school, the answers in the back of the book. Let's just go ahead and turn that page, make sure everything's correct, and look. Um, and I've had people say, like, I just hate to waste the money on getting blood work done. And I'm like, if we find out that there's anything wrong and it's early on, we can fix. So I know it's kind of seems like I'm dancing around your question, but the answer is you should make sure you're as healthy as possible the entire time, regardless of your ability. Because, if I had taken and gotten a dangerous panel and, Dante always looked over my stuff. If he told me, hey, it's time to retire, and I was a month out from the show I turned pro at, I'd just go, okay. we're done. I mean, it's just not a good enough trade, you know what I'm saying? So that's why I like to point out that it has nothing to do with your abilities, because I would say the same thing in reverse when you're not talking about, drugs. Like, I think the thing that bothers me about bodybuilding now and people who get into it is one of the first questions, how long is it gonna take to get to where I wanna go? How long will it take to be pro? How long will it take to be huge? Um, and I never thought about that. You know what I mean? Like, when I started bodybuilding, I literally I said, I'm drawn to these freaks. I don't know why. I just wanna look like that. And my first goal in bodybuilding was just to look disgusting. I was like, I would love it if somebody saw me and thought, "That's gross." Um, so then I just started, I had a guy write me up a diet on a napkin in the gym. I followed that thing like it was a religion, and I just did the same thing day in and day out, and then one day I looked up and looked in the mirror and went, "Oh, I'm really big." And it never occurred to me to wonder how long it would take, you know what I'm saying?
And I definitely respect the goal as well. As somebody that's dabbled competing myself and never had anything close to a pretty structure. I was a pro wrestler for years. I have nerve damage. I have muscles that atrophy like crazy and grow like crazy. And I'm like a action figure that's been broken apart and put back together 6 times at this point in
Mhm.
time. But I heard somebody, a non-bodybuilding person at the supermarket once, and this was when I was maybe 22 years old, saw a picture of Branch Warren on the cover of Muscular Development magazine.
Mhm.
And the exact quote escapes me, but it was something along the lines of, it looked like somebody just puked a pile of nasty muscle on top of that guy and it stuck to him. And I don't think they meant it as a compliment, but I was like, that's the coolest shit I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And that's always stuck
I
with me.
want
So,
that.
yep, exactly. So I resonate with that so much. Now, you mentioned Dante, and you're referring to Dante Trudel, who was a giant influence in your early career, probably your entire career.
Yep.
And everybody that knows, everybody in the industry knows that Dante's a guy that knows what he's talking about. They also know that Dante's incredibly elusive, and I would have all of about a snowball's chance in hell of getting Dante on the podcast. But tell me a little bit about your experience with Dante, what you learned from him, and what he taught you that you carried with you throughout your career.
So, I mean, I'll give a brief background. When I started deciding to really chase this, um, it's back in the forum days, and there was a forum called Professional Muscle, and I was on there, and I saw pictures of Justin Harris, and I saw these pictures, and I looked at his physique, and it was the first time in like my, I'm going to call it career, but it wasn't a career yet, in my bodybuilding time, that I saw a physique, and I was like, I can look like that, because I'm looking at Flex Wheeler and Sean Ray, and I'm like, I can't look like that. You know what I mean? But I saw his photos and I said, that's awesome. And I genuinely think I can look somewhat like that. So I started doing my homework on him and found out that Dante wrote his training. And I'm not sure if he did his food or anything at the time, but I just knew he did that. So once I found that out, I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I need to work with you. I want to get nasty, huge, whatever." Um, he responded back to me and he said, "Appreciate it, but no, you don't need me. You're already doing great." And when I first got that, I kind of like patted myself on the back and I was like, "Yeah, I am doing great. I don't need him." And then like 2 days passed. I'm like, I don't look like the guy in the picture. So I reached back out again and I said, "Hey, I appreciate the compliment, but I got to work with you." He, of course, then again said, "I don't train people anymore." So I emailed him back and said, "Well, I don't need you to train people. I just need you to train me." And I essentially nagged him into working with me. I don't know why. I just knew that what he had was the right thing. And my personality is never like he's got all the information. When you could still to this day go to Intense Muscle and figure out how to do DC training, which was his training program of progressive overload. But I've always just been the kind that's like, now let me just skip the confusion and the mistakes and just hire the guy who wrote it. So I got him to commit to work with me because at the time I was broke. I think he charged me $800, and I told him if I ever did a single thing that he told me not to do or changed anything, he could just discontinue communicating with me and keep the money. So we got started, and the rest was history. the way that his training works, progressive overload, it really helped with my mindset because coming from sports, I was able to have a scoreboard every day. I really liked the idea of going to the gym, having a piece of paper that told me what I did the last time I did this workout, knowing I needed to execute it in the same fashion, the same rep speed, same rest periods, everything like that. But if I could beat those numbers, then today would be the best workout of my life for this body part, and that really gave me something, which I'm sure everyone that's on this podcast that's listening has heard. Like, it's good to have short-term goals when you have a long-term goal. If your long-term goal is to be huge or a pro bodybuilder and you're 2 years deep, like, how do you stay interested for the next 8 years? Well, for me, it was having every day a goal to beat and to succeed or fail on. That was that short-term success. It worked really well for me. And he handled everything. He handled my training, my eating for a long time, got me as big as possible before I passed that side over to Chris Aceto when it got into competing time. And the rest was history. And he still, I talk to him probably every day. So, and yes, you won't get him on the podcast. It's impossible. I can't get him on the podcast. I'm like, I talk to you every day. I can't get you on the podcast.
I've had a standing bet with Skip Hill for probably 7 months now for $5 US that I can't get him on there. So if for some reason he won't go on yours, but he'll offer to go on somebody else, you could hook that up. I'll split it with you, 250, 250.
Oof, changed my life. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. If you could give us a little more detail on DC training, because everybody on the internet right now loves to fight about training from frequency to volume, and we know that DC training is rooted in progressive overload, but what are some of the other just basic concepts of it in terms of frequency, intensifiers? Because there's a little bit that goes into it that makes it different.
So, I mean, what you said is key. What the argument about, intensity, frequency, volume. And the reason those arguments take place is because they're correct. In order to grow, those three things all need to be in harmony. You know what I mean? And that's where people mess up, is because, like, I'm sure you're the same way based on being a wrestling background and getting into bodybuilding. You wanted to train your face off. You wanted to train too long, and you wanted to train too often, because that's the mindset of a worker. Like, I'll just work harder. I'll train for 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I'll get bigger. You know what I mean? And what we've all obviously learned quickly is that'll work for a stint in the beginning. But at the end of the day, the best way to grow is to make sure you're managing those three things correctly. And the reason I say correctly is because there's 19 ways to manage them correctly. If you like to train higher volume, then lower your frequency, lower your intensity. I hate, and I don't use that word very often, but I hate when people argue about how you should train, because I have a ton of athletes that are all trying to put on muscle mass. I have 7 guys running DC training right now. That's not even 10% of my athletes, because it's not right for most of them. I look at their training, I see what they put into a set, I notice how their body's recovering. I say, this is for you. For other guys, I'm like, yeah, I can't seem to get you to understand the difference between mental failure and physical failure. So DC training is a waste of time for you. To kind of help bring this in for people who have no idea what we're talking about. DC training is a low volume, high frequency training program where the majority of the focus is progressive overload, meaning you're looking for one more rep or one more pound every time a movement comes around. Obviously, this is also done in blasts and cruises, meaning you can't just progressively go up in strength week in, week out, year in, year out for the rest of your life. Your body has time periods. So a typical blast period where you're trying to actually see progressive overload week in and week out, day in and day out, is 6 to 12 weeks if you're doing it correctly. Then you take a time period where you back off, you let your body rest, let your CNS rest, and then you start again. When you start again with a program like this, you don't start right where you ended. You go back about 4 or 6 weeks to those numbers, start again and see how long you can go. And the things that decide how long a blast lasts are injuries, recovery. There'll be something as simple as you start to notice you don't really care to go to the gym because you're beat up mentally. And then a big one is also just if the strength is no longer going up and you're putting out the effort, that's your body saying, we got to tap the brakes. The idea behind this kind of training is really simple. I really like to dumb it down to help people make it make sense. If you can bench press 315 for 10 reps today, and you're eating correctly, you're sleeping correctly, you're supplementing correctly, wouldn't it be safe to say that if in 5 months you could bench press 405 for 10 reps, you're probably got a bigger chest than you used to? Pretty simple. You know what I'm saying? And that's why it was something that worked really well for me. I enjoyed the scoreboard side of it. I also like the fact that it always changed. So just to give you guys an understanding on the frequency. So by the advanced set of DC training, you're training your full body in 3 days, but you're training 4 days a week, which means whatever gets hit on day 1 also gets hit on day 4. So if we started with a push-pull legs, Monday would be push, that's chest, shoulders, tries. Tuesday is going to be back and buys. Wednesday we would take off. Thursday's legs. Monday we're back to push again. So here we are, just 5 days later hitting the same body part. Then you take the weekend off. The following Monday, what happens? Well, now the next thing in order is the pull, your back and buys. That now becomes Monday and Friday. That's twice in a week. So what ends up happening, of course, over the course of a year, instead of hitting each body part once a week, you've hit it more often. And then, of course, the last ingredient is the volume. You're not doing a ton. And this is where people get thrown off. Never fails. Someone asked me to set them up on a DC training program. I send them the program and they say, this isn't going to be enough. And I say, if you don't train with the highest level of intensity, I agree. It won't be enough. If you do, I promise you'll be ready to leave when this workout's over. You know what I mean? So it's, and that's why I say it's not for everybody. I really hammer that. A lot of times I get asked in these shows, like, should everyone do this? No, most shouldn't. Most should go in the gym, tinker, train what they think is hard with a high enough volume that it'll work, and that's, back to your kind of question in the beginning or mention in the beginning. That's one of my biggest losses in the industry of bodybuilding right now is that we all have to be right. You have to train DC if you want to get huge.
It's very interesting too, because we have so much information just in our pockets at all time on these supercomputers. And you add in the fact that everybody's got 27 different AI platforms now that can pull all these studies and pull all this, not just study-based information. They can pull anecdotal experience off of Reddit and what lingers still of the forums and social media and whatnot. Yet now more than ever, we're speaking in absolutes. And I always say that anybody that says there is one definitive way to do something, in 90% of cases, they're full of shit or they have an agenda, because there's always different ways to do these things. There's 1,000 right ways to approach all of this. There just so happens to be 20,000 wrong ways. We don't want to stumble into something that's completely ass backwards, but it doesn't mean there's only one way to do it. And to what you were saying before, I think one of the hardest things that's basically stacking the deck against us and being able to communicate stuff is the preconceived notions that are out there. And those are set by coaches, those are set by athletes, those are set by quote unquote educators. And in some cases, it's just stuff like people are afraid to send a workout to somebody that has 5 movements or 6 movements listed, because they feel like, well, they're paying for something that has to be super complicated and there needs to be 27 things here with all these intricate instructions. And maybe for some individuals, that's going to be the best use case. But not always. And I think it's our job as coaches, educators, people that have platforms to put information out there that tells people there's other ways to do that. And I think you've been doing that over the years to the highest degree between YouTube, general social media, all the podcasts that you're on. Now, over the time, we've seen a lot of trends come and go. Are there any specific aha moments that you had along the way where you just went, oh, wait a minute, if I do this way, this is going to push me forward? Is there anything that just all of a sudden it was like a light bulb for you over the course of your career?
Yeah, and it's embarrassing how simple it is. But obviously, I'm a progressive overload training. I love to train heavy. There's just something enjoyable about a bar's on the ground, you pick it up or you don't. But the ahas that I had, and there are 2 really basic ones, were that you have to ask yourself while you're training a certain way to make sure you're remembering why. So, why am I training progressive overload? Because I want to get as big as possible, as fast as possible. Okay. So, why is it then that it took me a year of squatting up to 6 plates for reps, free squatting, before I went, wait a minute, my legs aren't getting bigger, but my numbers are going through the roof? It's because I fell into the zone of just loving the training and kind of forgot why I was doing it. And one day I kind of looked and I'm looking at my legs and my upper body is getting bigger and my legs are staying the same, which means they look like they're getting smaller. And I'm going, wait a minute, I'm training legs harder than I train anything. And it was just the aha that you need to pay attention to the result of what you're doing as well, and then ask yourself why. I had the same issue with arms. My triceps, I grip and rip, throw 225 on a skull crusher and just blast away. Form may not be the prettiest thing you've ever seen. My triceps look like they're planets. Then I'm looking at my biceps, which are completely non-existent, and I'm making sure I'm blasting out heavy weight. And what's probably happening? My delts are helping, my traps are helping, everything except for my biceps are moving the weight. And I eventually just had to look and break down and go, okay, I'm not getting away from DC training, but I'm saying the way I am doing this training, the way I'm doing it, not the program, is wrong. Next thing you know, I'm grabbing the 27 and a half pound dumbbells and focusing on just moving my bicep, only using bicep to do a curl. And I'm now trying to progress with that, which is really hard because your ego and the idea that you can progress perfect reps is very difficult, and that's an area where I like to bring it up because it happens in both directions. I've had people tell me like they've seen rows when I was younger, and I mean, I'm doing 505 barbell rows, and they're like, "That's a terrible row." And I'm like, "Okay, I will accept that." But is it a terrible result? Because those are 2 shots I never lost, and with my physique was just turn around, I'll be fine because my back looked ridiculous. The point of that is I don't disagree with what you're saying if it's not working. I never got a back injury, and my back grew like crazy. So, on paper, you might say, "That could be tightened up." But for me, it was real simple in the opposite way. When I had people start to mention that, I thought, maybe I should alter that a little bit. Then I was looking at the result, I'm like, "Are you crazy? You're considering changing the thing that works best for you." You know what I'm saying? So the point to that is back to the whole idea of there's no absolutes. I had to look at my quad training and say, "That's not working." I had to look at my bicep training and say, "That's not working." But I didn't then, after I started noticing my biceps grow with 27.5 pound dumbbells, I didn't go, well, maybe I should lighten up the tricep training. You see what I'm saying? They were already huge. Leave them alone. So it's like if you saw me train, and not that when I did DC, I do them at the same time, but if you watch me train bis and tries the same workout, you'd think I have like multiple personalities. You know what I mean? You're over here with a gym pin and 3 plates doing dips, and then you're over here now like a 35-pound dumbbell squeezing perfect reps. You're like, is this guy confused?
So, just to summarize that, so there are certain body parts that you can take one approach to, and certain body parts that you can take another approach to. And just by putting that out there into the ether right now, at least 3 TikTok kids had strokes.
Yeah.
One of them's on their way to church right now. There's panic on the internet, but I have never heard it said just more directly and more truthfully, because we all see it constantly. But I don't think enough people realize that. I don't think enough people have had that aha moment that you had to actually go, oh, and then to lean into it, and to lean into it the right way, not to just all of a sudden jump on the newest training fad or change everything about the training. Because at the same token, for other body parts, like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Now, what about the nutritional side of things? Like what's your overview on nutrition? How do you look at how to structure a diet, and how has that changed over the years?
So that's different for everyone, in my opinion. Because as you know, you've got baseline for everyone, information, but The one thing I've learned over time, again, back to the no absolutes, I feel like we had a conversation before the show, but we didn't. It's when I start working with someone on their nutrition, let's assume that they have a program that's not bad. I will literally let them know when they hire me, hey, so this is going to irritate you. You just paid me, and I'm going to send you back the diet you're already following, and I'm going to watch it for 2 weeks. And then I'm going to start making adjustments. And I think this is kind of hand in hand with what we were just saying about the training. I don't tell your body what to do. Your body tells me what to do. You see what I'm saying? So we're cruising along and you're having some digestive issues. I might ask you questions. What are we seeing? Oh man, okay, that tells me you're having a hard time with the protein. Maybe you don't need as much protein as the other guy. We bring that down. Oh, you're bloating in your stomach and we got the protein pretty high. Let's bring that down, replace it with carbs while you're in a diet. Your calories didn't move. Oh, midsection pulled in a little bit. Okay, that's another sign. I always had an invincible gut. I could eat whatever Chris told me to eat. I could eat whatever amounts he told me, it didn't matter. I have guys now, I'm like, I had to learn about how dates help with digestion, and I had to have a whole 2-hour conversation with Chris Tuttle to kind of break into different fruits I could use when I was having this issue or that issue. And it just, again, helped me realize nothing is one size fits all. Because people used to say to me, like, whoa, do you ever have digestion problems? I'm like, what do you mean? I eat food. I digested food and I moved on with life. So the way I approach nutrition, to answer your question, is I've got a baseline idea of where I want someone to be. I start their diet there, and then I let their body tell me what to do. The key factor for all of you, whether you're doing your own nutrition or someone else is doing it, is you can't have good data if you don't follow. The amount of times, and I know you've been down this road, somebody sends you in their stuff. I have my clients rate their week, set, 1 to 10 on how their nutrition was, how their training was. And somebody will send me back like it was a 6. And I'm like, okay. And then they'll say, what do you want to change on the diet? I'm like, I would like you to follow it. I would like to start with that change. Because I can't, and I'll tell them I'm not being sarcastic, but I'm stealing from you right now because I can't make adjustments if I don't have data. So you want to do the same with all of your pieces, your training, your food, your supplementation. In my opinion, I go back to what Dorian Yates used to say. If you can't see measurable change in your physique in a month, then you need to ask yourself, does something need to change? But where things have gotten lost that you mentioned earlier is it doesn't mean scrap everything and start over. We got to take a step and say, okay, what is working? What isn't working? Little tweak, watch, see what happens. You know what I mean? I tell clients one thing that Chris Aceto taught me that I use a ton with my clients is they'll ask me a question and I'll use this really crazy answer that you guys have probably never heard from a coach. And I'll say, I don't know. Because I don't always know what's going to happen. What are we doing? We're doing this. Well, what's going to happen? We'll see. And then we get the feedback. We go, oh, that worked great. Or, oh, that gave me more data. Now I can make a tweak. And I think that I don't know is 3 words that need to be found again in coaching, in mentoring, in influencing, because I've learned more in my career with the things I didn't know and got feedback and said, oh, okay, than any of the things that I was sure of. And by the way, some things I didn't know ended up proving that the things I sure of, there was actually a better way also.
1,000% agreed. I remember I took a lot of courses with Dr. Dwayne Jackson on gut health and general nutrition and a lot of different stuff. And I did a bunch of mentorship calls with him. And one of the things that he pointed out was a really good coach also has a really good network because nobody knows everything. But if you're a really good coach, chances are you've contacted and worked with a lot of peers. And if you don't know the answer, you'll know somebody that does. And that ability to say, I don't know, is a powerful thing because it also speaks that you're speaking with truth. Because if anybody has every single answer, I can't tell you how many times I've had to at least say, let me do a little bit of reading on that. Let me check some resources and let me get back to you. And I told somebody once, if I could answer any question that you could ever have instantly, just out of my brain, I would be 50 times more expensive and probably have some sort of Nobel Prize because nobody has all that shit. And I would
Right.
love it if I did. And just to kind of like reinforce something else that you said, because for all these podcasts that I've done now, I've been doing these weekly, sometimes twice a week for the past couple months since March. And I've gotten all these brilliant tidbits of information from everybody. And you just keep hitting all these points that I think people just need to hear. And they need to hear it from a coaching standpoint, from a client standpoint, from a training standpoint. The other thing with it is what somebody comes into a phase doing, be it their diet, be it their training. I try to tell people all the time, whatever you're doing right now is making you the version of you that's approaching me and wanting to change. Thereby, if you want to become the version of you that's leaner, I need to take what you're doing and move things around in a way that would foreseeably get you leaner. Or if you need to be the version of you that's bigger, or the version of you with better cholesterol, or the version of you that's stronger. It all starts with what you're doing right now. So we
Right.
need to, if anything, normalize what you're doing for consistency and then start pulling levers, because I don't know what's going to fucking happen if I just change absolutely everything. Because if I just
Right.
give you a brand new diet, that's not your diet, that's somebody else's. So I love hearing that from somebody of your standpoint, your status in the industry, I guess you could say, because it gives me hope that enough people will listen to you and carry that forward and do that the right way. And I'm not blowing smoke. I'm not trying to be like, thank you, Jesus Dusty, for coming and saving all of us that
The
are
beard.
doing it wrong. But it is. But I used to, but I went mustache because it's trendy and I'm having a midlife crisis. But that needs to be done.
I think the thing that gets missed, man, and I don't. I've really worked. I have a very hard time understanding a lot of people, and so I've actually researched on how to better do that. And I realized that everyone comes from a place. I think that these coaches that are, in my opinion, making mistakes. I think they're doing it because they have the best intention. They say, "This guy just hired me. I can't just send him back a variation of his own plan. I need to earn the money." And I understand what they're saying. My 2 cents is this: you're hiring me for results. I know you've been here, and maybe some of your listeners have been here too, where you tweak someone's diet. You know, someone you've been working with for a while, you make a tweak, and all of a sudden next week they're better, and you're like, keep going, and the next week they're better, keep going, and 6 weeks later they're better, and you're like, okay, bro, I'm not robbing you, but as you can see, you're seeing changes. So I can't just stop doing it because I feel like I should tweak something so you feel good about your investment. Like, I will remind people, like, your investment is the result. And I am very happy that we're just riding this wave for 5 weeks long, because we all know it doesn't usually work that way. And that's awesome. So I don't, I understand where people come from, because they're trying to provide value. It's the same reason that I hear all the time. Oh, does your coach send a generic training program? So when someone comes to me and wants to do progressive overload, the very first line in the first program they read is, "This is a generic training program for progressive overload. We're going to run this so I can see how you're training, if this is the right program for you, and then we'll make adjustments." But I literally let them know, I send this to lots of people. You're not good enough for me to need to write you a very specific program. I followed Dante's basic DC program till my pro card. Nothing fancy for Dusty, just the program, So I like to put that out there as well, because I understand, like, if I was younger and I was trying to make my mark in this game, and I got Chris Aceto and you and me and all these guys, I'm like, I got to do something they're not doing. I'm going to change your training program every week. I'm going to lima beans are magic at 257p. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, I understand where they're coming from, but if you just give people results and you're honest in your approach, I hope people realize that, listen, as compared to your other shows, I simplify bodybuilding down to the easiest possible thing, because I think it works best. You know, I enjoyed that before. Chris Aceto, I don't know if you have spoken to him too much, but Chris talks very simple. And I think that sometimes people think he doesn't know the more exact wording of things. And I've watched him bust it out before to kind of adjust someone. And it's always fun to watch because I'm like, it's not because he doesn't know, it's because the simplified version is what works.
Exactly. And it's so intuitive with some of these guys. In 2019, I was working with Cody Montgomery doing his training for the Japan Pro. And while I was at
Hmm.
MI40, I had kind of almost like a side career of somebody would come to me, usually a pro. I was very lucky to work with a lot of pros in that regard to do their training because their coach doing everything else generally didn't do training. And if they were in the area, they would
Yep.
usually come down, like I told you off air, they would come down to work with Ben, and then Ben would go, no, and just point at me, and then I would end up doing it. So, and which,
Right.
I owe Ben the world for. And Ben also, to his credit, got me ready to be able to do that with these guys. So, had
Right.
a hell of a training season with Cody. And one of the things I always told everybody was, I'm not going to give you any insight on my thoughts on your actual diet, your supplements, anything like that, because we want one captain driving the ship. I'll make sure I'm watching what you're
Yep.
doing and I'm managing your training based on what you're eating and based on what they need you to do. I will just follow suit.
Right.
So I always say if you want to just have them CC me on the email, or if you just want to show me, or you just want to tell me what they have you doing. So every time that Cody would get any sort of information, he would just either tell me or show me. And it was literally just more of this, less of this. This is great. You look wacky. And I'm like, this is
Yeah.
awesome because but it always worked and he was
Yeah.
progressing like crazy. So it goes to
Yep.
show how everybody has a different approach and a different strength and a different way to do this. And no matter what, simplicity always works. And that couldn't be more true. Let's talk a little bit more about how your training and your diet evolved over the years, as well as your goals and whatnot. We eventually, got to that pro card status. And like you said, that was kind of the overall goal. And then it was a little while after that, you had the catastrophic situation. So can you give us a little bit of information on what had happened to you for those that don't know and how that changed anything or everything going forward?
Well, I mean, first off, uh, what happened, real simple version, is lining of the esophagus had thinned from years of overeating and different acid issues that we all know about. And it's funny, actually, I did a video piece with Muscle and Strength on this, and a lot of people claimed I lied about what happened, which just made me laugh. But I was rushing to get out the door, took a bite of steak that was too big, got caught in my throat. You know how sometimes you breathe fine, but you know there's something caught in your throat. So I literally took a shower, got ready, and it was time to leave. And I was like, I'm just gonna chug some water. I'll get this down. I'll be good to go. Slammed the water down, felt it go down, but it was uncomfortable the whole way down. So I was like, all right, well, I gotta go see my barber. The barber, tell her about it. She's doing the ding. 45 minutes later, I walk out and I'm like, I got to go train, but I just feel a little off. And from years of bodybuilding, I can puke whenever I want to. So I said, maybe it's caught. Actually, I don't know it. So I'll try to puke. It'll come out. I'll be fine. So I get behind my truck in a parking lot so nobody could see, let it fly, and it's blood. And I'm not talking a small amount. I have a video. I have a 11 and a half shoe, and there was more blood in one spot than my foot. So large amount of blood. I looked at that and I was like, that's probably going to hurt the resale value. Okay. So got on the phone with a friend. Long story short, she told me to go to the Mayo Clinic. Drove up there. Uh, Casually went in and said, hey, I coughed up a little blood. And so they got me filling out the forms. And I could feel the blood pooling again. Of course, you get nauseous. So I asked if they had like a little bag or something. They gave it to me. And I don't like puke in the lobby. I thought that was gross. So I went in the bathroom, let it fly in the bag. And I came out and I just happened to walk out. And a nurse looked over and saw the amount because there's measurements on those blue bags. She's like, did you just do that? And I was like, yeah. And she just turned and was like, I need a fucking room now. And I was like, okay. So real quick, for anybody who's stuck waiting in a waiting room of an ER, that's good news. If they'll make you sit there for 2 hours, probably better news than if they emergently run you in the back. So anyways, I went in the back. And I literally to this point still had no idea that it was a huge deal. I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm joking with the nurse. I'd get nauseated. I'd puke because the blood would come up. I'd feel fine. And they said, hey, we got to go in there, see what's going on. You're going to get a little surgery. Uh, Called my mother's boyfriend at the time, said, hey, can you come grab my dogs? I'm getting surgery. But don't tell my mother. I don't want her to worry. Went into surgery. 28 days later, woke up, found out I was in a coma. And yeah, during that time, I had basically three things that separately could kill me, and I had them all at one time. Few doctor friends that I have said that you should have died, don't know why you didn't. And that was that. But as far as how that impacted my training, it didn't. Um, it impacted the way I see life. I got a very, very clear understanding of how awesome every tiny little thing is. And it's something I've spent basically since then years just mentioning to people all the time. Like, I mean, I've been very fortunate. I have been sponsored essentially since my career started. I've seen every place in the world from bodybuilding. And I used to, by the end of, that time period, I'd be like, ah, damn, I got to fly to Australia to go sit at a booth and meet a bunch of people. I'm sorry, did you say you have to fly on an airplane paid by someone, meet people who love the sport, who actually give a shit that you exist? Like, what is wrong with you? And I just kind of had that wake up of how fortunate every little piece of my life was. But prior to the incident, I had already retired. I had already let myself come down in size a little bit. I say a little bit, I mean a very little bit. When I went to the hospital, I was 304. When I came out, I was 230 something. And just so people understand, that's not a that's not a drug issue or even a not lack of movement. When you're in a coma, they actually turn my body off. So there wasn't even communication with my body. I looked like a bobblehead when I walked out. It was quite interesting. Um, but got out and I learned a ton about what bodybuilding did. When I woke up, they said, "Okay, we're gonna have to teach you how to walk again. That's gonna take a few weeks." And I'm like, "No, it's not." I walked out of there 3 days later. Like, it's people don't understand what they're doing by training. Like, even the PTs who I mean, this is the Mayo Clinic. They're very good. They were like I mean, I was walking with a walker 2 minutes after they said that. I was like, "All right, let's do some laps." Like, I gotta get stronger. We're good to go. And when I got out of the hospital, first thing I did is I went and ate a steak because I figured one of those things tried to kill me. I'd take out another one of their family members. So I did that, and then, late that night, I headed to the gym, and I was like, "All right, let's get back to work." And, I'll tell you what changed was, very much gratitude for the opportunity to do what I was doing. I went to the gym, and I was like, "Okay." I had a issue because they had my neck a certain way, so my left shoulder wasn't, like I couldn't reach up and, like, top of my head. So I was like, all right, well, we got to build the shoulders up. I know that's has nothing to do with the muscle, but I just got to get them moving, see if I can get my body communicating with it. So I went in, I got on the Arsenal shoulder press, I put a quarter on it because I knew I'd be weak. And it didn't move. So I was like, all right, gonna be a little weaker than I thought, and went down to a 5 and got like 6 reps and started working my way up. But I think what was great and something I really hammer on people that get injuries is when I was coming back and trying to get stronger, I never thought to myself, "Oh, I used to do 6 plates a side on this." I thought, "Last week I got 5 pounds a side for 6. This week I got 9. That's a lot stronger." And I was able to really enjoy the process of just I mean, you gotta remember, like, I was smoking the week before. I'm on a hammer strength incline press with 1 and a quarter, and I get 5 one week and 11 the next. Like, think about what that strength jump is? And I will tell you too, and Dante used to give me crap all the time. He'd say, "It's gonna be a lot harder to shrink than you think when you retire." And I was like, "Dude, I will shrink fast. I'll be down to 230, no time." I was still weak, and I was back up to 280 pounds in, like, a couple of months because my body had been over 300 pounds for a decade. So, I mean, my body just went, "Oh, we're getting big again," and my size was much more impressive with my strength at this point in time? Um, but since then, the difference is I wouldn't say I'm trying to shrink, but I'm definitely not trying to get bigger. I eat 4 times a day. My meals are 200 grams of rice with 10 ounces of ground beef, eggs, some toast. One of my 4 meals is a David bar, which is 150 calories. Like, I've learned that if I want to not get bigger, I have to eat smaller. And when I'm ready to shrink, I'm gonna have to stop training the way I train. I'm just not ready. My blood work, the docs say I'm fine. I've had all the tests. My body's fine to be the size. And I'm a lot smaller. I mean, I was 265 last week, which is it's a lot less. And I'm pretty lean, but I mean, I feel like a ninja compared to 305. I'm like, I get out of bed, moving around great. You actually feel like you can do things, hop around, work on shit. So uh, I've definitely learned, like in hindsight, if someone said to me, hey, you got to get really big again, but I'll pay you, I'd go, nah, I'm good. Like, it's fun to look back, but I don't need a 22-inch arm anymore.
You definitely realize after the fact. Now, I didn't go through the extremes that you did, but I spent the better part of my late 20s, 30s at about between 240, 260 pounds, given what I was doing at the time.
Mhm.
And then now I'm 40 years old. I float around 195 to 200 pounds. So
Right.
it's just one of those things where priorities kind of changed. And one thing that really started to make me approach things differently was my situation, which, like we talked about off air, was incredibly similar to yours. If anybody doesn't know, I don't talk about very often. Literally the same exact thing happened to me. And it was from years of forcing food down. I would always get the food boluses where it feels like you can't breathe, but you can breathe, and you just chug some water and just keep going through it. Mine would always come predominantly from white rice, I found caused it.
Right.
I would do way too much rice. It would sit there. I would just chug my gallon, knock it down. And years of that doing damage. And then eventually, like I mentioned to you, I had some food poisoning. I went to eat a steak. I was trying to eat it fast because I didn't feel like eating. I threw that piece up and ripped the thing right open. Almost the same thing. I went to the ER, and while I was checking in, just making jokes about the copay, all of a sudden started hemorrhaging out blood. Now, I was lucky enough not to be put into the medical coma, but I was 2 weeks in the ICU. I had 3 surgeries to fix it. They eventually had to go in through my femoral artery in my leg and cauterize all of it, even down to when I got finally released. They kept me there for quite a bit just to make sure I took to the blood transfusions the right way. But
Mhm.
then as I'm leaving, I'm asking the doc, I'm like, is my whole life different? Do I have to be on a special diet? Do I have to train differently? And no, you can do the same things you're doing before. And I'm like, yo, listen, like I'm 260 pounds. Like I don't train like I think you train. No offense. I don't
Right.
know if I can maintain that. And then she really had to spell out like, no, like we cauterized it. We removed the broken blood vessel. It's repaired. It's not going to happen. It was a freak thing. Don't do that with your food anymore. Slow down when you eat. And if you
Right.
have acid reflux, address it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, shit, okay. And she's like, and just take it easy because you're going to be weak.
Yeah.
So, same thing. I was in the gym a couple days later, just trying to get my strength back. And it just kind of, if anything, it gave me that appreciation for life, like you were talking about, and for all
Mhm.
those little things. The one thing that I found though is I was lucky enough to have very smart mentors in the world of like functional nutrition and health. And I was always keeping an eye on my blood markers and everything like that. It did make me a little bit neurotic after the fact because I
Right.
think it was that sneaking suspicion that one day something would catch me off guard. I would think it's nothing. And then all of a sudden I'd be in the ER again.
Right.
So that's when I started getting neurotic about getting my calcium score and getting my kidney scanned and my liver scanned and everything like that. So I segued it into a good thing, but I'm just curious, did you ever experience any of that, or were you just able to just jump back on the horse of like, okay, I'm going to just push forward again and just continue to be attentive to my health? Did you have any of those weird moments?
The only thing I had was one time complete situation, but I got I choked on something just a little, and it wasn't anything dangerous. It was literally lettuce, but it got caught in my throat, and I actually panicked because I was like, okay, I know how to get this up or down, but I don't know if I should. I mean, I literally had fear as if suddenly a piece of lettuce could take out my,
Mhm.
so I had that. But other than that, man, um, I think that fortunately for me, this took place when I no longer like I was retired for years at this point. I stayed big because I love to train. And I just said, okay, we don't need to ever get that big again. Watch things and again, kind of like what you mentioned is I realized there was a lot more to life that I had, and I have zero regrets. I want to make sure I say that for anybody who's following, like I lived and died bodybuilding and I would do it all over again during that period of my life, but now I wouldn't. Now I have things that are, I mean, I was leaning down for a trip, which just meant not having cheat meals for a few weeks, unless one of my daughters said, "Do you want to go get pizza?" Because I'm not saying no to her. Like, I'm like, cool, that's an opportunity to do something. And that's the stuff that I don't give up anymore. But, everything else is just, I'm very fortunate that bodybuilding had me watching my health. I think those of us who care about living watch our health better than most people do. And I think that's the area that really gets messed up. And it's just like anything. Everyone gets a bad name from the weak links. Bodybuilding does not have to be unhealthy. Now, don't get me wrong. I'll be the first to say, being over 300 pounds for a decade, I shaved some time off my life. I just believe that your body does not truly know the difference between those things. Obviously, my heart was not exactly what it would have been if I didn't do the things I did. So I'm not saying, oh, I'm the picture of health. But I think that you can manage it in a smart way. And the problem is a lot of people pretend they're invincible and then they die and people go, see, that kills you. And I'm like, well, actually being an idiot kills you. So, and I just think that's important. There's a difference. But at the same time, you and I both have injuries that essentially came from bodybuilding. We can twist it and turn any way we want to, but what it really came from was eating food. So everyone's worried about the drugs and the training and all this. And I'm like, guess what? You and I had issues because we ignored very simple signs because we didn't know. Like, I had the same thing. I used to choke on rice all the time. I was like, I got to chew my rice better. I don't know why I'm always choking on rice.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? It's the rice that almost got me. It's just the steak that pointed it out.
I went through about a 3 to 4 day period leaving the hospital where I told myself I was going to eat everything out of a crock pot for the rest of my life. And it lasted all of about 3 days. And to the point on the lettuce, maybe once a month now, I'll eat too fast and get a little food bolus.
Yeah.
And it's still that, well, son of a bitch. And now I just know I grab one of my dogs and I take a walk and I just move until it just kind of passes down on its own. But every time I'm just like, here we fucking go. So that'll probably last for a while. But that is something to pay attention to. And I don't want to just make this like the esophagus podcast by any means. But when I did post about it a little bit when it did happen, I ended up getting a hold of several people in bodybuilding or athletics where the same thing ended up happening to them. So just one thing to pay attention to for anybody watching this that maybe wants to listen to Dusty today because they want to find out how to become the biggest, gnarliest motherfucker on the planet. Take that and run with it also. Chew your food, take your time. Other things can get carried away. And it's always, not always, but it could be something that you're not even paying attention to. We're all worried about trend and we're not worried about the fact that we're literally shoving rice down our throat with gallons of water. I shouldn't do that. That'll become a reel. And the point is, pay attention to everything, be cognizant of everything, and appreciate everything. Before we wrap up, Dusty, I want to ask you, the past couple years, we've had all of a sudden all this access to open up to peptides, to small molecules. Now it's kind of like 2010 with like muscle tech and everything again. Everybody's got the coupon code, but instead of for Nitrotech and Cell Tech, everybody's talking about the SLUs and the retitrutides and all these peptides. And I think it's awesome because I think a lot of these things are amazing tools that we can leverage for health, performance, longevity. But I also think it's kind of terrible because we have a lot of people just shoving them like they're the latest and greatest pre-workout. What's your standpoint on this access to all these peptides and small molecules? What do you think of them? Should they be used? Should they not be used? What's your overall thought?
Summarize quickly. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great that they're there. I think that more people need to worry about the big things first. I have clients who I'm literally teaching them how to train. They're sending me training videos. We have a lot to learn, which is great. I've been there. It's all good. But then they're wanting to ask me about this, that, and the other. And I heard this will take me to the next level. And it's not that it's incorrect. It's that it's the order of operations. You know what I'm saying? If someone came to you right now and said, hey, I'm a billionaire and I want to get huge and I can take as much growth as possible, you're still going to ask them what they're going to eat. And you can't ignore what you're going to eat or how you're going to train. The growth is not magic. and the same rules apply. And I think the other side that that I dislike about it is rather than using these things as an advantage, they're being used as a crutch. You
Right.
know, it's like back in the day, you used to see guys that like they're taking more Clen or they're taking more T3 and then they're letting their diet ease up. It's like that's not how it works. It won't diet for you. You know what I'm saying? So that's my only issue with it, and it has nothing to do with the products. I think that I think that what is available is fantastic. I think human nature is the problem. You know, I look at it very simply. Guys our age, my age, we like to say, "Oh, back in the day, we didn't have this because everyone was so hardcore." No, we're lying. That used to be what the steroids were. The kid that would just buy juice and then not eat right and not train hard enough, and he'd get big and then he gets small again. It's just a new version of the same thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like people who say that social media shouldn't exist for kids. Well, guess what? When I was a kid, they thought MTV shouldn't exist. There's always going to be a thing that the previous generation says is wrong. I think the biggest part is just understanding that the people who understand the basics are going to be the ones that go the furthest, and the coaches and experts who know way more than I do about these specific things. If they can take some time and learn a bunch of the basic stuff that I have, they'll be more valuable.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's so eloquently said, and everybody needs to pay attention to that. The entire point, because we need our foundation, we need to have access to things, we're going to have access to things, and we're going to put our best foot forward by understanding them. Dusty, thank you so much for your time. I think this has been a podcast that can point a lot of people in the right direction, be it from a beginner standpoint, intermediate, and even advanced. Because one thing that I've noticed over the years that you're incredibly good at, it's taking these concepts that are very complicated to a lot of people and just basically simplifying them and just saying like, yo, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to approach it. And I think the industry needs more of that. If people want to dive more and more into your information, your coaching, your platforms, where's the best place for us to find you?
I'm old, so really, Instagram's the place to be. Just Dusty Hanshaw 08. And if anybody has specific stuff, they can just email me, dusty@dustyhanshaw.com. I'm definitely in the phase of my career that trying my best to give back in the way others give to me is what I like to do. So when someone's serious, I don't mind, you know, giving some stuff. And then, of course, just for those who take advantage, there is a point where I'll remind you have to pay. But, you know, I think it's good to give out some basic stuff. So if anybody has questions, they can comment there. I do question box a lot because I like it better if your question that I know 5 other people has gets answered. So that's kind of why I prefer to put questions that way, because answering one person versus one question that hits 10 people is more valuable.
Agreed. 100% agreed. Dusty, again, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the DDT Method podcast. We'll see you next time.